Hey everyone, Karen the Warp Spinster here. Thanks for joining me on my channel. This is clue 2 for the mystery quilt that started last week. If you are interested in doing the quilt but haven't looked at that first video, you want to go back and check on It's a Mystery Clue 1. This, just to review, is about using up some of those 2.5-inch squares in our stashes. And there are two different sizes you can work on. One is 72 by 90 and the other is 90 by 108. So you can make your choice based on that. I'm doing the smaller size, the 72 by 90. And we have a lot of squares here. Today we're going to start sewing those squares together. So let's get started. The first step actually doesn't involve sewing. You will want to first of all go and just pull out single squares. For the smaller quilt, you want to pull out 20 and set them aside. For the larger quilt, pull out 30 and set them aside. I will be putting all these numbers down in the description for your reference later. Then we get to the sewing. This quilt is designed to just use the 2.5-inch squares as they are. No further cutting or sewing, just to keep the character, the 2.5-inch squares. Quick, easy, but something with some character to it. So we're going to be sewing strips of these 2-inch squares. The next size strip, we save single squares. Now we're going to start sewing strips. And the first set you're going to do involve 2 squares. Now I'll warn you ahead of time, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be calling these 2-inch strips instead of 2 square strips, but you'll know what I mean. And for the smaller quilt, you will want 40 sets of these 2 square strips, and for the larger quilt, you'll want 60. You can press the seams in either direction. If you've got a dark and a light, go ahead and press it toward the dark. It's not going to matter later on. Or you can press them open if you prefer to press open your seams. I continue to make, even when I've gone past my 40, because I'm making the smaller size, I will continue to make sets of 2 squares because I can use them for the other strips that we're doing. There's building blocks for the longer strips. And the next set is going to be 3 strips. So you could just sew, of course, a lot of pairs and then do assembly line sewing for all of this and just add on another square. Don't be too concerned or too fussy about what goes next to what. You aren't going to know what these end up against later on in the quilt anyway. And I just make sure that I don't have 2 of the same, too close to the same color or the exact same print next to each other. Other than that, I don't worry about it. So you will need, of the 3 square strips, for the smaller quilt, you'll want 40. And for the larger quilt, you'll want 60. And I've gotten a start on some of them here. Here's my 3 strips. I've got a bunch of 2 strips. When the 3 strips, you can press them, I would just press them all in the same direction. It doesn't matter which direction because these can be easily flipped in the final design, so just press them all in the same direction. And that's it for the 3 strips. Next up, you have 6 strips. 6 squares in a strip. And for that, you will need 60 for the smaller quilt and 90 for the larger quilt. I did go through and add these up, and they do come out to the correct number of squares, which is always a relief when you're designing a quilt. And again, when you press them all in one direction, or press them open if you prefer, although that's kind of, takes more, I find it takes more time. And that's it for this clue. So to review that here, you are going to go and pull out some single squares, and you will need 20 for the smaller quilt, 30 for the larger quilt. For the 2 square strips, you will need 40 for the smaller quilt and 60 for the larger quilt. Then you will need strips with 3 squares. Oops, that's the wrong one. And you will need 40 for the smaller quilt, 60 for the larger. And finally, you'll need some 6 strip sets. Let's do it this way so it all stays in frame, I hope. And for that, you will need 60 for the smaller quilt and 90 for the larger. I think I'm going to allow 2 weeks to do these because, especially if you're doing the larger one, that's a fair amount of sewing. It's not difficult at all, but it's a fair amount of sewing, and I know everyone has busy lives, especially for moms and dads whose kids are in school now and all kinds of activities. So this is clue 2. I am going to stay on and just sew together and chat for a while. I've had a few people mention that they like that while they're sewing. It also gives you an excuse to have some time set aside to just dedicate to sewing. So I'm going to just stay on for another, I don't know, probably 20 or 30 minutes. If that's not your thing, then I thank you for tuning in for clue 2. I'm anxious to see what all of you are doing. At some point, probably a little further along, I think maybe I'll start a Facebook group or something where we can start sharing what we're doing and seeing what each other is doing and chat about the mystery quilt. If you're leaving us now, thanks for dropping by to pick up clue number 2. Clue number 3 will be available in 2 weeks. I will have some videos in between, but they won't be the mystery videos. If you are going to hang out with me for a while, stay tuned. If you are leaving for now, be well, be happy, be quilting. Peace out. Thanks for staying with me for some quilting and chatting. I'm just going to chatter fairly mindlessly. I hope you chat back to me. Even if I can't hear you, I can hear you in spirit or something. Not sure it works that way, but we can just join our quilting spirits together. I'm just going to be sewing a lot of 2 square segments together because I can use them for making my longer strips. I've done quite a number already. I need 40 of those, but I can just keep making them because, of course, I can sew the pairs into the 6 square strips. So I'm just going to be doing that and just chatting. So how are all of you doing? I worry about everybody in these times with COVID raging everywhere and forest fires in the US and floods everywhere, and I'm hoping you all are okay. I'm thinking about you all and hoping you are well. And I'm also thinking about some other videos I want to do. If you have ideas for what you'd like to see, please put them down in the comments and I'll see what I can do within reason. I'm also working on my next newsletter, which, oh, there's another pair. I like it, which will be due out October 1st. And I sort of think about it in my head throughout the quarter, but it comes down to brass tacks here at the end of this month. I hope you've all signed up for the newsletter if you wish to. I promise I won't send you a bunch of email. Occasionally, if I have a pattern that comes out, for example, I might send an email to you, but otherwise it's just the quarterly newsletter. I'm not going to inundate your inbox. I don't like that either. And you can sign up for that newsletter at the bottom of any page on my website, which is just warpspinster.com. that's enough about me. This isn't about promoting me. This is about quilting. What things are you working on besides this mystery quilt? Are you someone who just does one quilt at a time until it's finished, or are you like me and have 150 things going on at once? I'm working on a pattern. You may have seen it. Sorry, this chatting is going to be so choppy, but I fear you can't hear me over the sewing machine, especially when I'm over to the side here. The pattern I'm working on, the written pattern I'm working on, is for Pointless, and you may have seen it on my Facebook page or Instagram. And the pattern process, I discovered when I started writing patterns years ago that it's not as easy as one might think or one might hope. It's a lot of work and checking and rechecking, and I have my sister is my technical editor, and she is bar none the best one around. She catches everything. The only time I've had to publish an error notice on my website was years ago, and she had told me that was an error, and I just skipped right by it and published it without correcting it. So the errors, if they exist, are my own. So I am fortunate that I have another pair of eagle eyes. Well, a pair of eagle eyes. I wouldn't say mine wouldn't say I'm exactly eagle-eyed, but she does a good job of making sure I'm minding my P's and Q's. She's also quite good about letting me know. She quilts as well, and she's pretty good about letting me know more nicely than this, but basically, huh? What are you trying to say here? She's much nicer about it, of course, but there are times, and then I go back and look at it and say, I haven't got a clue. I don't know why I was saying it that way. Sometime I may do a class or a YouTube video or something about some hints or tips for writing patterns. As an experienced quilter, sometimes as I'm writing the patterns and doing very detailed explanations, I have to remind myself that not everybody has been quilting for 40 years and the step-by-steps are important for them. I'm also particular about the pressing, and people who have talked to me about my pattern say that's one of the things that they like, is that it has the pressing instructions. Anyway, back to what everyone's quilting. I don't mean to keep coming back to me. Stripe pin, stripe pin. Would you believe? Oh, yes, I got a pin cushion here. What am I saying? I have actually do you have one of these magnetic pin cushions? Love those. If I happen to dump something on the floor, I could just go over and pick them up. Just pressing on that, and that's ready to go already. Other quilts I'm working on, that's how I got sidetracked. I'm always working on a lot of them. I'm embarrassed to say I'm working on a Night at the Improv quilt, and I'm so admiring the quilts that I'm seeing on Instagram and Facebook. I'm part of a modern quilt group on Facebook, and oh man, there are some, wow, talented quilters out there, I gotta say. And Instagram, yikes. Gorgeous stuff coming out of there. It's very inspiring. Some days it feels a little intimidating, but it is inspiring. There's so much talent out there. And the designers are wonderful, and the things that I see people doing with their long arm machines or their domestic machines with quilting is just amazing. Pardon me, I have a frog in my throat. It looks like I'm being picky about what I choose from here, and I sort of am, but not really. I've sort of got different collections stacked differently in here in different places, so I'm reaching to pair or square some different collections together. So having said that, down in the comments, just let me know the kinds of things you're working on, or favorite designers, or favorite quilts. I don't think they let you post photos, do they? I don't think so. We are going to have to start a Facebook group or something to share things. I think I definitely want to do that for this mystery quilt, but maybe just as a group of quilters getting together. Or quilts that you have made from inspiration from my YouTube videos, others' YouTube videos. YouTube's a wonderful resource, isn't it? Frankly, there's a lot of crap on there, but they're just really excellent people, and I keep finding quilters and other folks and other crafts that I follow that just don't have as many followers as they should, so I'm trying to subscribe and like their videos. Mine just took off one day, and I don't know why, but I'm very grateful to all of you. I'm so happy that you're here and find something of value in what I do. And I hope I can continue to provide that for you. So let me know what you're thinking about. I'm thinking about some videos on doing postcards, quilted postcards, or I don't know if you've seen the artist trading cards, but I think some just little mini quilts, postcards, or quilts that we can send to each other. I did a little test of sending a quilted postcard through the mail as a postcard, and I had assumed, I had understood from discussions that I'd seen everywhere that they would just hand cancel them. But I'm pretty sure this one was not hand canceled. It was in pretty good shape. It just had some black area on it, a little bit blackened, like gray, as if it went through a machine and some of the ink sort of smeared. So I think it went through the canceller. So in the end, if I really want to make sure it gets through in good shape, I would put it in an envelope and pay a little extra postage for the bulk. The one that I sent through had zigzag edges as a finish rather than a binding. No, yeah, binding. If I did a binding, I think I would, I don't know, I could try it, but I hate to hand the post office any more troubles than they already are facing. Now that's the U.S. Postal Service. In other countries, it may be a different story. If so, if you've had experience, then please share that, because people want to know. But I think that will be one that I'm doing in between, in between the mystery clues. Excuse me. Let's swig of water here. And I have another idea for 2.5-inch squares. We'll see. It's going to be another video of, well, this is what's in my head. Let's see how it turns out. And possibly another idea after that, sort of related to that one, but we'll see. Got lots of pinks together here. Lots of pinks there. Let me grab a green. Just pairing these up so I can run them through. I have a pretty short attention span. Well, I get bored easily, I guess. Once I have something that I'm really enjoying, I can focus on it and lose track of time, but I generally do things in shorter periods of time, in spurts of time, and then come back and do more. And that's sort of the approach I take with these, where I will match some up and then just take them over to the machine and just rip them right through. And then I'll do a bunch of 2 square strips, and then I'll just stop and pull out some single squares and add some more on for the 3, etc., etc. So I don't like to just spend an hour or two pushing 2.5-inch squares through. I don't know what the difference is between pushing through 2.5-inch squares and adding a third one on, but there's a break in there of, I don't know. But everyone has her own workflow, I guess. Yours may be very different from mine. You just put the pedal to the metal and sew it on through. All right, I've got some together. I'm going to go over and sew here. In the meantime, I'm listening for your ideas and for the quilts you're working on right now. I find more and more as more time goes by that I'm missing my local quilt store, which closed it was quite close to just before COVID hit. And I volunteered there and I taught classes there, and it was so much fun. It was like Christmas every week with new fabric and notions coming in. And I'm really missing that. A year or two ago, I embarked on a journey to learn how to design fabric patterns, patterns on quilt fabric. And I've been learning a lot from that and meeting some wonderful, wonderful fellow surface pattern designers. And some of them have fabric lines that have come out or are coming out, and that's exciting, always fun to see. Such nice people, just like the quilting community. nice people, very giving and sharing. So I'm fortunate to be a part of those two communities, plus the library community, which is also great. Well, since I've retired, I don't have as much contact with that, but still in touch with some friends from those days. Quilting really has long been a group kind of endeavor with the quilting bees and exchanging templates and patterns from the old days. It's just much easier for us to do it now with technology and social media. More 2 square strips. I hope you all are having good weather wherever you are. We've got some remnants of a hurricane going up the Atlantic coast, I think, though I don't think it's going to make landfall, but creating some pretty high surf, and the South has been battered with hurricane and rain, so that's a long recovery from that. So I hope everyone is doing okay. Our weather is lovely here today. This is supposed to be our last quite warm day for at least a while. It is the middle of September, so I guess that's appropriate for here in the Midwest US. It's, I think, supposed to be up in the high 80s today maybe, and then for the next 10 days or so in the 70s, which is lovely. Make it more pleasant to go out and mow. I just have a few more mowings. I have to say, there is apparently a possum crossing from the other side of the street in my backyard. I've got a high slope to the backyard. It runs along a main drag. And every year, the past 2 years, there has been a dead possum either in the gutter in the street adjacent to my yard or in my yard. And the one that was in the gutter did end up in my yard. So I think somebody came by and just shoveled it up into my yard. And that makes me sad that possums are dying. But it does seem to be a possum crossing, and I wish they'd quit dying in my yard. All right, we've got a lot more 2s. Let's do some 3s here. I need more of the 3s and 6s than I do the 1s and 2s, of course. So I'm gonna just start doing some 3s here, matching them up. I just had a comment from one of my longtime quilting friends that I haven't seen in a while, except on Zoom last spring, I guess. And she just commented on another video, and I was like, oh, hey, how are you? I started hosting some of my old cohorts from quilt shop days on Zoom, and we would just sit down and quilt together and chat started out 4 hours. Now it started out longer than that, and then kind of cut it down. And as summer arrived and more people were outside doing things, we decided to stop doing it until maybe the fall, or late fall, I guess, when people are finished with their yard work for the most part and are inside again. kind of fun revisiting some of these squares. Some of them are from jelly rolls, where I had leftover strips and cut them into 2.5-inch strips. Excuse me. Or from the candies that Moda has, the packets of 2.5-inch squares. But a lot of them are from other quilts that I've made, and I'm just remembering those quilts. And it's a nice thing about scrap quilting, I think. Although sometimes they do get out of hand, and I swear they're still cloning in my bin. I'll start calling my bin the rabbit hutch. It is getting warm back here in this room, and I don't have my fan set up back here. I have one downstairs, and you would think that by this late in the summer, I would have brought it up by now, wouldn't you? This spot is upstairs in the addition on my house. I had a bay window put in a few years ago, and it just lightened up this room tremendously. And the natural light is really good for filming. And my studio, look at that, two exactly the same. In my studio, the light is horrible because it's in the basement and I have no windows there. And the lighting is kind of funky anyway, so I would rather be down in my studio because everything is closer to hand, and this table could go back to its original purpose. So I may have to work on that so I can get some lighting set up downstairs that will work. It's pleasant enough up here, but it doesn't have my comfy chair and the layout that I like. One good thing about it is that it forces me, before I do a class or a video, to make sure I have all the tools that I need, which makes sure that I tell everyone what they're going to need. Alrighty, let's just slap a red and orange one on here. I'm wondering if your color tastes have changed as mine have. My mom loved warm earth tones, and I loved them too. I still do. But in my quilting, I've gone more modern, thanks to my former local quilt shop. It was a modern shop, and honestly, I wasn't at all sure when it opened how I was going to feel about that shop, but I really loved it and started doing more modern quilts and really like them. And I also find that, partly because of modern quilts, but not entirely, I'm really liking brighter colors and fabrics now. I don't know if that's just part of getting older. I don't know. I had hypothesized at one point in my life that older women who made these really bright Afghans, granny square Afghans, and all these things that were really bright, is that, you know, maybe they had cataracts, they weren't seen as well, and the bright colors were, they could see those, and which was, I don't know, that's kind of a, I'm not pressing these the same direction. Let me do this again. I'm just kind of willy-nilly, however I feel like it. But I don't know what it is, but I don't have cataracts and I see fine, and And so that was really a, I don't know, some kind of height of arrogance or something. But now, it's like, yeah, those bright colors. Maybe we've just lived long enough that we don't care what people think, and that's who we are, and that's what we're gonna do. And I don't know, but I am loving the bright colors these days. Or maybe it's just kind of how the world is, and we need something cheerful and bright in our days, our lives. All right, I think maybe I'm going to call that a day for the video here. I thank you if you've stuck with me for a while. If you like having a little set aside time for sewing and chatting, let me know below. Won't hurt my feelings if that's not what you like. That's why I divided it into two, so that you get the gist of the clue to begin with, and then if you want to stick around, you can. It's been fun chatting with you, and I hope to see you for the next video, the next clue at least, but I will also I'll plan on another video on Wednesday, which I think will be yet another way to use 2.5 inch squares. So anyway, thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this video in the mystery quilt, please give it a thumbs up. I'll see you next time. In the meantime, be well, be happy, be quilting. Peace out.